The successful musicians are the ones that take that same creativity, that same ability to improvise, to innovate, and apply it to marketing, apply it to salesmanship and those types of things. But it does take some people just intuitively kind of grasp it, but there are a lot of lessons out there. When you think about artists that succeed, they tend to be very, very good entrepreneurs, even if they've never really thought of themselves as such. If you think about the Grateful Dead, going back however many years, the Grateful Dead really predated the issue of file sharing. They didn't care if people went and taped their concerts. In fact, they encouraged it. They set it up so that people could do it. And this created this kind of community. In essence, the taping of a Grateful Dead show would be called a loss leader in business. They were giving this away in order to make money elsewhere. And the way they were making their money was with their ticket sales and their merchandise. And they were very, very protective of that. You could tape all the shows that you wanted. That got you in the door. But you couldn't bootleg their t-shirts. They protected that very, very strenuously. That's a very entrepreneurial idea, to come up with this innovative way to attract customers. In the Grateful Dead sense, it was largely giving their music away and then monetizing some other piece of their intellectual property, which was their ticket sales and their merchandise. Obviously, in today's technology, we're forced to do that. And the music becomes truly a loss leader for some people, like Best Buy or whatever. But it's just interesting how the Grateful Dead were thinking in a very entrepreneurial way. If you think about a band like Phish, I remember when they were just starting out and they were trying to break into the Boston market. Rather than kind of repeatedly coming down to Boston and trying to build a fan base there, they rented some buses and brought their fans down from Vermont to play at one of the premier rock clubs in Boston. Doing that caused such a commotion in the Boston community that Phish now was publicized everywhere. It became this wonderful marketing event. The next time they played there, they didn't have to bus anyone down because it just spread like wildfire. It's this incredibly entrepreneurial spirit. Going into a market with a marketing campaign like that, you see that with other products, but a lot of artists don't see that connection. Guster, a band from Tufts University up in Boston, they basically figured out an entirely new distribution mechanism. What they would do at the end of each school year, they were students at Tufts, they would send their friends, their fans, home with 2 Guster CDs. And the mandate was, give this to your other friends who have come home from their colleges, right? So then, and tell them to give one to someone else. You know, Guster did a deal for $1 million. They sell hundreds of thousands of records. This was a completely revolutionary entrepreneurial system where they said that the distribution mechanisms that were available to them, well, they didn't have any that were available to them. They couldn't get into the system, so they created a new one on their own. That's entrepreneurial spirit. That's innovation at its finest. Once you take it from this innovative idea and you start to generate processes and systems about it, then you become a real entrepreneur. And that's what the great artists are doing. You think of Corin Capshaw, Dave Matthews' manager. He saw a need to fulfill the Dave Matthews Band's fans' desire for merchandise. He could have farmed this out to someone else. Instead, he starts his own company, handles all of Dave's merchandise, and then he thinks to himself, you know what, there may be some other artists that could use this service too. Yeah, like you too. You know, and all of a sudden, by using that anchor that was Dave Matthews, he builds this huge business that many people now don't even know that has anything to do with Dave Matthews. They just think Dave Matthews is another client of this business. So economies of scale, all of these things that you think about in an entrepreneurial way have direct relationships to the music community. And the great thing is that because of the innate sense of a musician to think in an improvisational way, to shift, to face a musical problem and figure out a way around that, be it a key change or whatever, it's the same discipline that you have to have when you think about marketing. What musicians have to disabuse themselves of is that, oh, I'm a musician, I'm not a good business person. The two are much closer than people think. A good entrepreneur has to be first and foremost courageous enough to innovate. You can teach tools to help you begin to innovate, but it's very hard to teach somebody to be an innovator. I firmly believe that all people are creative, but you have to have a skill set that allows you to believe that your ideas are valid. And I think the beautiful thing about most musicians is they have that particular type of ego that says, you know what, my musical ideas are valid. They then need to think that their business ideas are valid. The key, the kind of sine qua non, without this there is nothing, of an entrepreneur is the ability to solve problems, the ability to see that something needs to be fixed and come up with a solution. You gotta have that type of mindset. You have to say, well, this isn't working the way it should be, and I can make it better. Socially, musicians have been doing that for forever. I mean, they've been the people that say, this social system isn't working the way I want it, and through my music I can potentially affect change. More and more musicians are thinking, hey, this business mechanism isn't working, I can do it better. And certainly downloading podcasts, those types of things really enable the artist to come up with innovative ways to fix problems, to offer solutions. That's the fundamental quality of an entrepreneur, someone who can see that there's a problem and come up with a solution. The other qualities, really, courage is a big one. The feeling that you can operate without a net. And again, musicians seem to have an innate sense of this. A lot of people need jobs in which there's some sort of job security. Well, if you're a musician, you've already kind of bought into the idea that there isn't a whole lot of job security. It's a good thing for an entrepreneur because it allows you to take those leaps of faith, whereas someone who didn't have that type of personality would say, no, this is too risky. Once you've figured out that you can solve a problem, it's marketing. It's the ability to find out exactly who your customers are and how you can reach them, and what the strategies are to do that. There are great resources out there, some business techs and non-business techs that allow you to understand how ideas begin to get into the marketplace. We have a bibliography, a kind of bookshelf on the Alfred site where there are a number of books that speak about this. And then it's putting processes in places to manage that, a kind of organizational behavior. And organization can be as simple as a band. I think bands have to think of themselves as entrepreneurial units. And if they have a good manager, then maybe he or she is kind of the CEO. But it's imperative that you become an entrepreneur as an artist, because even if you do sign to a label, the more independent that you are within that label, the more power you'll have. The best artist-label relationships are partnerships. Labels are always set up as entrepreneurial units. I mean, there's no other reason for them to exist. I suppose there are a couple nonprofit labels, but for the majority, they're for-profit ventures. If you can then meet them on kind of more of their own terms, in other words, you're an entrepreneurial unit too, then you have a much greater chance for a partnership than you do if you just come to a label and say, well, go ahead, here I am, here's my music. That never works well over the long term.